Hello and welcome everybody. As you can see by the boards on my desk, we're going to be talking about another product that is kind of near and dear to my heart. As you guys know, I am a pretty big fan of Akko products from a value orientation standpoint. And with the introduction of this keyboard here, the Monsgeek M1, we've seen them kind of spread the gamut of what can be accomplished in a budget space. So I started with a PC75, ended up getting the MOD 007, and as you can see, these boards are a little bit colorful, a little bit bright. And then came the Monsgeek M1. Now this one was a board that was described to me in a way that kind of embraces what Akko has done here, and you'll see that in like their lavender and purple boards in the Monsgeek series, but also adds an element of professionalism, basically a workplace fun board that can both work as a gaming board or as a workspace board. So when this board was introduced at $100, it kind of took the space by surprise. But we're not going to be talking about 75% today. They've actually got a new board that came out, and it's in the same vein as the M1, but it has a near full form factor. And that board is the Monsgeek M2. Now this is the 1800 style layout. It's got the numpad, and it is also QMK compatible, just like the international Monsgeek M1. So why don't we go ahead and cut over to unboxing and take a look at this and talk a little bit about what this board offers over your Monsgeek M1. Alright, so here we've got the Monsgeek M2. It's very similar, like I had stated before, to the Monsgeek M1, which we discussed in a previous video. However, this is a compact 1800 layout keyboard, so it's slightly larger, offering you a numpad. And this is great for professional scenarios where you need access to that numpad. It is gasket mounted. It's also hot swap with south-facing sockets and comes in black, silver, or purple colorways. And the best part is that this starts at $110. And you can get this off the Monsgeek website or various other partner retailers. So what I want to do is I want to start by unboxing this board to show what you get in the box. Then we'll talk a little bit about today's build, we'll build it, and then we'll talk about my final thoughts at the end. So why don't we go ahead and unbox this guy. So as you can see, it's a fairly standard Monsgeek box like we saw with the M1, very plain. And then we've got our included foams to keep it from moving around. And then they tend to give you some really neat inclusions. So this is a preformed tape mod that covers the entire back of the PCB. We also get a nice rubberized USB cable. This is USB-C to USB-A. We get our screws and a nice Allen key. And then they've also included their stabilizers. These are the PCB mount stabilizers, again, like we saw in the M1. We get our nice little dust cover here, which is pretty useful if you're going to keep this in a workspace. You want to keep the dust off of it. I don't personally use those, but I think it can come in handy. We've got our PE foam covered board, and then the last couple things we've got in the box here are the Monsgeek M2 manual. And then we've got some stab pads, and then it looks like we've got our rubber gasket socks here. Let's take a look here. This is a little bit differently packaged before. Okay, so these... Interesting. Okay, so we'll take a look at these and cross that bridge when we get there. Now, one of the things that I want to see is what exactly comes in here. All right, now this is my first time taking a look at this as well, so I'm hoping for good things here. So very much like what we saw with the M1, it's sort of the same thing. We've got a PC or polycarbonate plate. It's likely mounted with silicone gasket socks. And then we've got a PE foam sheet here. We've got south-facing sockets. And then we have no stabilizers populated because this does support the PCB mount stabilizers. I want to flip it over here on the back and kind of showcase a little bit here because they did make some aesthetic changes to the back. And let me go ahead and grab the M1 here to show you a comparison. So one of the complaints that I received when doing the videos was I don't like the sticker. So there's no Monsgeek branding on here except for the sticker. It is fairly large, you know, it's yay big. Now if we look at the M2, they have engraved the Monsgeek logo into it and then reduced the size of the sticker. So hopefully that will appease those individuals. I didn't have a problem with it personally, and I do find it nice to have serial numbers on the back of a board when you're looking at more mass-produced boards. Another thing I want to show is that this particular one comes with silver inserts on the sides, whereas my M1 came with gold color inserts on the sides. I don't know if that's going to pick up very well with the light, but they are slightly different. And I may rob these M1 sides depending on what kind of aesthetic I decide to go with in the end. Now, I think it would be really cool if Monsgeek would actually offer the ability to purchase those separately. So let's go ahead and start taking this board apart so that way we can see what's included. Because one of the things that was mentioned in my M1 video was that I chose not to use, there's a sheet of, like a shiny sheet that goes in the bottom that helps prevent bottoming out, shorting rather. And I did feel like that would alter the sound a little bit, so I didn't use it. If this is included in this one, we will use it in this build. Now we are going to use the toolkit that I have here. It's pretty great for anything keyboard related. I'll put a link to that in the description. Okay, so we've got it apart. One thing I do want to mention is that these are non-ferrous screws, which means they are not magnetic. So you will have to kind of finagle the board and flip it over to get those to come out. So be careful when doing that. Okay. So we've got our top case here. As I mentioned, we do get these silicone sock type things, which is my preference. It's much better than pour-on in terms of assembly. So I'm going to go ahead and disconnect our JST here. And we do get a nice foam that's very EVA-like. So there is some changes in the foam that is a little bit unexpected because they were using pour-on. And I wonder if the price of pour-on did affect the cost of the board. And that, you know, makes sense considering that, you know, we're looking at $100 for the M1, and now we've got a larger form factor, a larger layout on the M2. So I can imagine, you know, reducing the cost in some capacity does, for production, helps with the cost of the overall board. Again, we do get, if you look in here, the pour-on, or rather the EVA PCB foam, and we also get the PE foam. So we've got dampening for both the plate and for the switches. And I'm going to use that because that's how it's shipped. Now, one thing I want to do is I want to voice my, I don't want to say disappointment, but there are a couple things here. So what I'm observing here is we've got this thin kind of junk foam that I'm not a huge fan of, but it is highly compressible and very porous. So I'm going to remove these for the sake of the build, I think. I'll get back to that because I want to talk about the build that we're going to be doing here in a moment. I may actually keep that in. Now, they went ahead and inserted this sheet here. And it looks like what they did is they supposedly fixed the JST placement so that way people aren't having issues with it this time. I didn't have issues with my JST last time, but apparently it would sit above, you know, it wouldn't sit in the channel. So they've gone ahead and done that. And then they have already stuck this sheet to the bottom of the case. There don't appear to have been any changes made to the inserts on the side. Let's see if they're kind of the same issue. Now, I never did end up force breaking mine on the M1, but I don't know if you can hear that, but it kind of rattles a little bit. So I would recommend putting a piece of tape on the ends there to tighten it up. But yeah, it's pretty straightforward. And I think what we should do is go ahead and put this back together real quick and talk about what the build is. I'm going to leave this sheet in here because the build that we're going today is, it's going to be something a little different than what we normally do. So what we're going to be using today for switches is we are actually going to be using the Akko Haze Pink. Now the Haze Pink switches are a 58 gram silent linear switch. Now this is the switches that Akko produces are typically made by TTC, and not TTC, excuse me, KTT. And I do believe that these are KTTs as well. So this is like one of the first KTT silent switches, if not the first KTT silent switch that we're seeing. And I apologize if I'm incorrect on the manufacturer, but we shall see once we take a look at them. So these are again a 58 gram silent linear. They come in at about 31 cents a piece. You do need to purchase 45 switch packs. So if you do want to kit an entire board like this, you will need 3 packs of them. Unfortunately, they only sent 2 over, so we're going to be covering the alphas for the most part, and then I will provide some additional switches to fill in for the other keycaps. But we'll be primarily doing a typing demo on this. So what I'm wanting to do today is kind of build a silent board, a board that you can take to the office. You know, a lot of people are returning to the office with those requirements going into place. And I was thinking this would be really cool to kind of demonstrate a nice, classic looking board, and have something that's quiet in the workspace, but also looks good and has a little bit of flair and makes your coworkers go, hey, what's that? So we've got our Haze Pinks, and then for our keycaps, we are going to be using the Akko Marrs Cherry Profile keycaps. So these are the Marrs Green. And now these are pretty good for the board. Akko did want me to point out though that there is no 1.5U function key. So when we're going to use the 1.5 function key down here on the board right here, we're going to need to use the super key. So I just needed to bring that up. But overall, the kitting is fairly good, and I have no issue using the super key for that. And the best part is that the price on this is like $50. So it's kind of hard to beat a $50 price tag on a full keycap set that can cover multiple different layouts. So what I want to do is go ahead and get these stabilizers lubed up and put in, and then we'll do a quick montage of the build, and then we'll discuss the build. We'll do a sound test, and then we'll talk about my final thoughts. So I will see you guys momentarily. All right, so that was pretty painless, and I think this is looking pretty fine, honestly. So no major complaints about it. I did remove that very porous foam that was in the bottom, just because when you pack a lot of foams inside, it sort of acts like a tape mod and amplifies the sound. And of course, we're going for a silent build here, so all of these keys are all the Haze Pinks, and only the F keys, the function keys, are the I put in wine reds just because they were some other Akko switches I had on hand. So overall, I think the build process was fairly simple. I do wish that we had plate mounted clip-ins, or sorry, PCB mounted clip-in stabilizers. I know a lot of people do prefer the screw-ins. I just lack a little bit of dexterity when it comes to them, and I often fumble with the screws. On the plus side though, they are ferrous screws, so you can put them on the end of the bit, and if you have a magnetic bit, they will stay there. Now with that being said, the kit does not come with a Phillips bit required to remove the standoffs, which would, you take the standoffs apart so that way you can separate the PCB and the plate. And it does not come with, again, that bit which assists with, assembling the stabilizers. But beyond that, it was straightforward, just straightforward. We just put the screws back in, got some fingerprints all over it in the process, but for the most part, it was easy peasy, like nothing really difficult about this build. I also left out the standoff so that way you don't have to worry about reduced flex. So I wanted to make sure that we retained as much flex as possible. And I also didn't want to transfer that rigidity through the board, amplifying the sound anymore. Now, what I'd like to do is go ahead and jump into a sound test, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about the overall complete board. So I will see you on the other side. All right, I have to say, I know I say this a lot, but I'm pretty impressed. I think we're looking at if an under $200, around $200 build here, and you get a near full-size keyboard, which a lot of people entering the space are looking for, and there are not a lot of options. This thing is fully aluminum. It has the nice classy looking inserts with these Marrs Green keycaps. I think it looks absolutely fire. It's like an off gray, not quite a black on the alphas, and then it's got the green and then the yellow accent keys if you want that. As far as the switches are concerned, silent is a stretch, but also yes. I think if you are going to use non-silent switches, definitely force break this board. I did not, and there is a little bit of spring noise in these silent switches that does kind of transfer into the case, and I think if you do a force break, it'll help eliminate that. And then these switches absolutely should be lubed. It's not that they're not smooth, it's that there is more noise on the top out than you would want, I guess, in a silent application. However, this is just as quiet as a membrane board, honestly. But I think what we'll do is I may do like a dedicated switch review on these in the future, where we lube these switches, especially that top out and those springs, to kind of get rid of that. And then we may just revisit it in this board because I think this is a very, very good execution of an 1800. This is, if you're new to the keyboard space and you're wanting a full size, or you're a veteran in the keyboard space and you want something mid-tier that you can bring to work and you don't have to worry about it getting scuffed up or something, this is where it's at. So yeah, let me know what you guys think in the comments. Do you think this turned out good? Would you buy these switches? Would you buy the Monsgeek M2? I think it's definitely a very compelling board, and I give it my thumbs up again. I don't think it's a miss, and I think the slight improvements that they made over the M1 are top notch. So if you guys like this kind of content, be sure to click that like button and hit that subscribe button so you can see more content that'll be coming up here soon. And I'm looking forward to spending more time with you guys now that we're kind of got the videos rolling back out again. So thanks so much for coming and hanging out with me today. And until next time, y'all have a good one.